So I want to do a short video on sexual guilt, right? And I'm just going to talk about like a few different things. I'll do an in-depth video on it on YouTube at some point. Plot twist: as I was speaking, this actually turned out to be the YouTube video eventually, and it wasn't a short video because I went on a ramble. So enjoy. Maybe tomorrow. But like I was just having some reflections and I thought it was important to talk about it because I had really bad like sexual guilt from like maybe the age of 8, I think, 7 or 8, probably till I was in my early 20s, right? And it was like an ongoing kind of thematic thing in my life. And what do I mean by sexual guilt? It was basically a ton of guilt for having sexual desire in itself, right? And I just thought I was the most disgusting, perverted, sexually driven person ever, right? I just had this view of myself that I'm perverse, and for some reason, it just did not match with the image that I had for myself. But more so than that, it just did not match what people saw me as, because people saw me as this like really like nice person and like nice kind boy and that kind of thing, right? People don't expect anything deviant from me, right? So even at times while I mean, there were times when I felt comfortable with it, but then a lot of times where I did not feel comfortable with it. But then there was this constant like ongoing battle of like, what image do I need to fulfill? Because do I need to change this about myself because people see me this way, so maybe I need to fulfill that? Or also maybe I should be someone who does not have certain sexual preferences or a sexual drive, because maybe that's the better thing to do. I don't know. So there were so many things that happened, right? And I mean, there's no like origin point to it, but like if I really go back and see where when it really started, I have three elder siblings, right? And when you have three elder siblings, you want to do the things that they're doing, you want to be around them, you want to, watch the things that they're watching. So when they'd be watching, certain movies and whatnot, I'd be hanging around and, I'd be interested in doing the same things. And I think somewhere like when I was younger, because of that, I was like exposed to certain sexual content, nothing too explicit, but just your standard like, sex scenes in movies and things like that, right? Even something that wasn't like, super explicit or like fully nude or anything. I mean, when you're a kid, even two people making out is also like ooh, right? And of course, at that time, like in the 90s, Titanic was also like the big thing. So I mean, stuff like that as well. But I think that, and we also had those VHS tapes where there was like the censored version and the uncensored version and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so but yeah, I think that's maybe where it kind of started from, because I remember at a very young age as well, I started having some like sexual fantasies. By the way, I had no idea what sex was till I was, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 years old, something like that. I didn't know how it happened or what took place necessarily. But like, so when I say that started having sexual fantasies when I was maybe 8, 9 years old, it was what I thought like sex was or like sexual acts were at the time. But essentially, for me, that felt like the max peak level of, you know, perversion or something like that that you could have. Even imagining two naked people just kissing, right? Even that for me was like, oh my God, like I should not be thinking about that. So from a very young age, that happened. And I just was completely afflicted with this thing that I should not be having these thoughts. And then even in religious settings or whatnot, like when I would uh, go to the mosque to pray or something like that, I'd be having sexual thoughts then. And I would start having sexual thoughts about God as well. And I'd be like, oh my God, pun intended. Like, I'd be like, why am I thinking this? No, I should not be thinking this. This is so bad. I'm like the worst, sinner ever. So it overlapped a lot with like religious stuff as well. But then, I mean, again, because I was having sexual fantasies, for me, that was even as a young kid, that was the real event. That was the proof that, oh, I'm having these sexual fantasies, I am enjoying them. I'm also taking time out in some ways to really daydream about them, that means I am a perverted person. And I am sexually driven at a young age, and kids are not supposed to be sexual, right? And it just like really, really made me super anxious about like myself. Um, and then also, I experienced abuse when I was 14 years old, right? And for me, that was like hard evidence. And at the time I didn't know it was abuse. I thought it was something I participated in. So in my mind I thought, oh my god, I have been perverse all this time, and now this incident that has happened is factual proof that I am a perverted, sexually deviant person. And I think I didn't know that it was abuse until my early 20s. So all this time I thought, oh my god, I have to keep this deep dark secret to myself, and I can't speak to anyone about this. And this is like the worst thing. And this is proof of my innate sexual nature that I can't tell anyone about. And so it was like years of like just really experiencing that. And I just like, yeah, it was quite difficult, to be honest, because I mean, I felt like I could not speak to anyone about it. I felt like there was yeah, there was I didn't feel comfortable talking to anyone about it, because I just absolutely felt like the exception, because everyone around me, even though like guys in my class would, I mean, at some point they did start talking about sex and sexual stuff and whatnot, but for some reason I felt like I was, I still felt like it was more real for me. And again, especially because of the abuse incident, it felt even more real than any other thing, right? And it just like, I felt like there were so many moments where I'd be lying down at night and I would just be tossing and turning, thinking about how terrible of a person I was. Then, on top of that, of course, I was going through puberty as well, right? So, a lot of like, of course, then you start discovering self pleasure and things like that. And it's like, oh no, like, and again, by the way, I also didn't know other people did that. I thought I had done, like, I'm doing this. I was a naive kid, right? But I felt like, oh God, like, I'm doing all this stuff, and then just, it just like made me feel even more terrible about myself as a person, right? And I remember, by the way, even before my contamination OCD really blew up, I had moments of, I had completely forgotten about this. I had so many moments of taking showers because I was feeling a little sexually guilty about having certain thoughts or doing certain things, and I'd be doing that quite often, right? And of course, and that really kicked in really strongly and intensely after the abuse incident, right? That's when the sexual guilt like really, I think, solidified after that, very, very intensely, understandably so. um and I was, and it would be a case of like whenever anyone would say something nice about me, right? Let's say during the parent teacher conference, right? And my teachers would say something nice about me to my mother. Immediately I'd be like, yeah, but she doesn't know that I am this really uh, disgusting person, right? Or any relative who would say something nice about me, I'd be like, yeah, but they don't know that I'm a pervert. So it was like roaming around like some kind of secret criminal, and just, like, again, harboring this kind of secret in me that I couldn't tell people about, and almost having this like secret identity kind of thing, in fact. And I was, and in some ways, I had started to in like my sexual side as well, but it felt such an effort to also keep up a front of, oh look, I'm a good boy, I don't think about sex, I don't think about sexual things, I don't have sexual desire or sexual drive or anything of the sort. Um and there was, because of all of this, there was a certain amount of, I think, controversy that are attached to sex drive, right? I think after having, again, because when you're with your friends, when you're young, when you're a teenager, you have all these discussions around like sex and sexual exploration and whatnot with your friends. And what that also made me realize as well, through many conversations, that my sex drive, I felt like in comparison to other people was higher in, right? At least like compared to a lot of my friends. Of course, I'm not saying like to everyone around me, but at least the people that I was closer to, or the people who I had these open conversations with. And that for me was like, oh no, further evidence now that I am like that. And then of course as you're growing up, your understanding and and your sexual preferences and desires also become more complex, and they become more detailed, and you start to develop certain fetishes and kinks as well. And also started attaching a lot of controversy to that, oh, like, I this is something that really turns me on, then I don't know, I mean, I don't think I can ever tell anyone about this. Or like basically like what anyone can ever know is that I'm turned on by your basic, straightforward sexual stuff that other people are. I can't ever have anyone know about any of this. Again, basically my brain was looking for anything and everything to attach a certain level of controversy and a certain level of stigma, make and to basically make myself feel like this, like, absolute pariah in society kind of thing. And trying my best to live that kind of secret life and whatnot. So I mean, it was quite, I think it was quite up and down. Especially also, by the way, living in an environment where conversations around sex are not really encouraged. Of course, amongst my friends, it was like a very open thing, and I mean, it was chill. But in the sense, like, there were no, I would say, maybe adults that I could go to just to discuss some of these things. I did find a couple of people that I could confide in and speak openly about anything and everything I wanted, which super helped, by the way, because especially when you're a kid and you're going through all these like conflicting feelings around sex, like just having someone sensible and reasonable to, like, talk about these things. I mean, that really helped me just gain an understanding of the fact that a lot of things that I was experiencing was quite normal as well. So it's also like the extra level of like isolation with that, and the silence around that is what made it seem even more controversial than it needed to be. But of course, it's also OCD. So I mean, I think maybe, perhaps, I don't know, maybe if I had spoken to people earlier as a kid, I still would have felt quite guilty about things, because I still would have wondered if I was the only one with having these thoughts and whatnot. And I think I really, in my late teens, I think I started to really just kind of accept in some ways that I guess maybe I am a sexual person, right? And it came with mixed feelings even at that time, because it was like, I mean, I don't want to be seen as a sexual person, but I guess maybe I am, and maybe I just have to acknowledge that reality, um, because I was trying to, for so long, I was trying to run away from this possible reality that this is how it is, right? And obviously it didn't help, and it was just making me feel even more guilty whenever I was indulging in any sexual acts. And then as I started to really just kind of embrace that possible reality, I would say, maybe without even knowing, maybe these were some earlier versions of unconditional acceptance that I was applying to myself. Because I kind of like stopped fighting it off, and I started to really, like, at least in myself, not outwardly as much, but at least within myself, I started to embrace it as that I guess maybe this could be my personality. And with some friends, I started becoming more open about my sexual desires and my sexual preferences. And to the point where, I mean, they did start seeing me as a bit of a sexual person, because they were like, oh, I guess you are a bit more sexually open and driven that way. And with them, I did feel comfortable, and it helped like reduce a certain level of stigma and controversy that I was attaching to all of that. Um, and then I think also just really exploring sex as a bit of a subject as well, and understanding how sexual desire operates. Again, that can also, I mean, I understand that can also become super compulsive for people as well, to try and go down like a research path of, oh, like, is this normal or is that normal? It wasn't that. It was, I think I just like credit to a couple of really good adults I had around me, who became kind of like really good mentors for me in life in general. And those were where some of my early philosophies of life started to also solidify as well by having these conversations with those people. And it was great. I mean, I think it really became like a guiding light for me, and a starting point for me to be able to look at things from a different perspective and an angle that maybe the rest of society did not really encourage it uh, in general in conversation. So that became like a good springboard for me to also understand sex from a more human biological angle as well, and also bring down like the level of guilt and just like beating myself up for, let's say, having certain sexual desires, or and also indulging in like self pleasure and whatnot and those things. So it really helped on that front. And I started seeing myself more as maybe a human being with like certain things that are happening in my biology, some things that are also a lot of things that are actually not even in my control. Even my sexual desire and my preferences of what I like and what I don't like, what turns me on and what doesn't, also, like, is not something that I have chosen necessarily. And think about it, like, you might be someone who, I mean, if all of us had all our sexual preferences written over here, and we were all like walking down the street, everyone would be looking at each other like, because I mean, a lot of us have, let's be real, a lot of us have sexual preferences that may be considered slightly controversial, or might be considered slightly questionable. Like, I don't know, this thing is a little. Mm-mm. I mean, all of us have that. But nobody really talks about it. People are also, by the way, a lot of people are, and this is just a personal opinion, I think a lot of people are very quick to judge when they also learn about certain things about other people's sexual preferences. But when you really go into their search history, you'll find a lot of questionable stuff as well. I say that in inverted commas, because like, even with preferences of like fetishes and kinks as well that people have, let's be real, right? Those are things that you don't choose. Those are not necessarily things that you are saying that, oh, this is what I want to have as a sexual preference. No. You can like have those things, like those things just like kind of exist. And by the way, it's one of still in many ways, sexual desire and what people like and why they like it and what kind of partners we choose as well, sexually and romantically, is still one of the biggest, like, in some ways it's still a big mystery to a lot of people. It's not like an exact science, and people are still like learning a lot about it, right? We don't know why humans entirely pick a certain kind of person or want to have a certain kind of sexual act with someone else. So it's, I mean, in many ways, the jury's still out on that. Of course, we know a lot of different patterns and whatnot, but like, yeah. Anyway, so I was just like giving you my life story on this, but like, there were there were a lot of other things in between as well. I mean, because obviously it's such a my teenage years were very up and down, but a lot of real events that my brain was latching onto as absolute proof that I was a sexually perverted person and I could just never be accepted in society ever. Um, and that really, I think, took me a long time to. Obviously, I mean, I was a kid as well, so you don't have that kind of like a deep understanding about these things. But as I started to become more of an adult, also become more mature, also have a lot more conversations and awareness around like what other people are doing, because a lot of people also hide this stuff. I mean, they don't talk about the stuff that they are doing or that they think or feel. And as I got to know more of that, I was like, in some ways, everyone's a pervert. Like, everyone's a pervert. And of course, like, everyone, like, people with, like, for example, POCD or like harm OCD or whatever, they'd be like, yeah, but my like choices are like questionable. I mean, my point in saying all of this is that, like, it doesn't matter whether what level of like societal controversy it is, it can literally latch onto anything, right? Anything at all. Any kind of event, any kind of frame of reference that you have. You might also be someone who, maybe in your town or in your family, because your family might be, let's say, a bit more religious, right? So, no matter how much other people around you you get to know of who are also very sexually driven and open people, you still might feel like the worst case ever, because your frame of reference is the family and the surrounding that you grew up in, right? Or like some of the what experiences and what things that you observed growing up. So there's so many different factors to it, but like I think that like again for me this was like a very ongoing thing. Now I don't really even think about it, to be honest. Like if I mean it really doesn't cross my mind as anything to really sit and dissect and think about necessarily. um I think the last time maybe I felt guilty about anything sexual, on or I felt like I was carrying sexual guilt was maybe like 8 years ago, 9 years ago, maybe. I think, I don't know. I can't really. I don't remember exactly the years because I haven't been charting them. But like there, I mean, again, but it was a lot of work in progress, and also again there was a huge element of that I need to present a certain way, and it's a real big sense of identity I was attaching to it, that oh, I as a person cannot be this, I as a person cannot be that, and we attach such a strong sense to it that we really get caught up in trying to prove it to ourselves and other people as well. Like, and like even when sometimes my friends or anyone else who try to make any kind of sexual insinuation about me, in some ways I really wanted to disprove that as well, because it was like, no, 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 don't let that kind of like label or personality trait, I didn't want it near me. I didn't want to be seen at with that, and it was almost like something was tainting my personality image, as well, and I wanted to keep it squeaky clean. And I think in my early 20s I really started to be like, you know what, and this is even before I knew I had OCD, or any of it, but I really thought about it, and I was like, I think I just need to stop trying to be a squeaky clean person, and just, I think, acknowledge that I have these like maybe ugly, disgusting parts about me. That's literally how I thought about it at the time. Because again, and now looking back, I think that was kind of me making peace with the worst case scenario. And in some ways, I mean, my worst case scenario was somewhat true as well. I mean, I guess I was a sexually driven person. I guess I was having more sexual thoughts. I guess I had a lot of sexual preferences that way as well, maybe in comparison to other people. I also, by the way, compared to my class fellows, I hit puberty pretty earlier as well. I started developing facial hair quite early. My voice started changing like earlier than other people. This Adam's apple, this big Adam's apple that I have, came out pretty like you know earlier than my peers. So, and I mean, I don't know, like when I do really look back and realistically looking at certain things, keeping aside the obviously exaggerated irrational stuff like, oh my god, the abuse is like, proof of this and that, and if I keep aside even all that exaggerated irrationality as well, there is a certain truth to the fact that, yeah, I was like, the thing that I feared about myself, they were somewhat true. It actually was. And maybe I also don't need to run away from it. And when I stopped running away from it is when I was also able to make more peace with it, and I also kind of like eventually stopped thinking about it as well, because it was like, I mean, I can't really do anything about this. Of course, like I said, I mean, this entire story, this was like more than a decade in the making. It wasn't an overnight thing of like, yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, for a long time, it wasn't what it was because it felt extremely torturous. My siblings, in fact, like often say to me things also like, oh, like you are, and I mean, I guess they were just teasing me as like elder siblings too, but they were like, oh my god, you have such a polluted mind and this and that, and oh my god, when they used to say things like that, it used to give me like a big gulp in my throat. I would have this like big heavy feeling, and it'd be like, oh no, maybe they see through me. And it just felt like the absolute worst feeling. And then when I would, like, explore sexual content on my own as well, I would be like, yeah, that's proof. See, it's a real event. I am sexual, like, I am what they call, I am a polluted person and all of that stuff. And I think I even, aside from, like, sex scenes in movies and whatnot, I think I also got exposed to pornographic imagery as well, pretty young actually. I can't remember what age. Maybe I was 9 years old. Thankfully, I didn't like develop any kind of addiction to it at the time. But obviously, because I was exposed to it, it really opens up the mind pretty early on as well. So yeah, a lot of real events and a lot of proof and evidence for my worst case scenario through all those years, and it just, like, again, felt like the biggest chip in my shoulder. But you can get there as well. So anyway, I mean, there's a lot of stuff with unconditional acceptance as well to work on this and whatnot, and like so many other perspectives I can really discuss here, to be honest, because there's a ton of different things I can touch on. But I thought I would touch on it because this is a part of my journey that I mean, I talk about this a lot in my one-to-ones, by the way, with people with POCD, harm OCD, or any other kind of like sex-related or sexual guilt-related, you know, themes. I do talk about this a lot, about my personal life as well, and drawing from those experiences and whatnot. But I haven't talked about it a lot in my videos, so I thought it would be a good one, especially for a lot of people from like Muslim backgrounds or any kind of religious backgrounds, because for them the topic of sex is pretty controversial and it's like kind of like hush hush as well. So I think it's important to highlight that for a lot of OCD sufferers from places like the UAE or like the or South Asia, and things like that. A lot of brown communities for that matter. So yeah, I thought I would come here and talk about that. If you have questions, of course, you are more than welcome to ask me about those questions. And yeah, I'm here to talk about anything. Um, and if you ever want to, like, I mean, people I work with, I mean, they know this, but like, if anyone ever wants to, like, also talk to me about this as well, of course, you can ask questions in the WhatsApp group as well, and I'd be happy to go into some of those things. Take care. Bye.